Hey everybody, it's Sophie and Marco Dish on the movies. Today we're doing our last quote scary movie, a Hammer movie called The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll that came out in 1960. It starred Christopher Lee as Paul Allen, the cad, Paul Massey, who plays Dr. Henry Jekyll and Mr. Edward Hyde, Dawn Adams as Mrs. Kitty Jekyll, and David Kossoff, Dr. Ernst Littauer, who is like Dr. Henry's friend, mentor, colleague. So, anyway, in the traditional story of Dr. Jekyll, at least how it's been betrayed in other versions, Dr. Jekyll turns into a bearded, sharp-toothed, maniacal, freaky Mr. Hyde, who acts like a monster. But in this version, Mr. Edward Hyde is a handsome, bare-faced, evil sociopath who you should still avoid because the experimental drug Dr. Henry Jekyll is injecting himself with is making him insane.
He wasn't a sociopath, though.
Marco.
A sociopath is somebody who doesn't have any feeling. He had a lot of anger towards his wife rejecting him, and a lot of feelings towards that.
You don't think Mr. Hyde was a sociopath?
No, he was a psychopath. There's a difference.
Okay, well, I don't agree. But anyway.
There's a difference. It's in the book.
In the Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll, he is basically married to his work. He is very inward and unsocial, preferring to think, research, and write focusing entirely on his great experiment. There are instinctual forces within us which supersede constraints placed on us by our place in society and even their own British culture. Later in the movie, Mr. Hyde remarks to another character, quote, "We British people never know what we truly feel." Dr. Jekyll especially is being mocked by his very beautiful wife and beautiful and outgoing wife, Kitty, and good friend Paul, who are carrying on a very public affair. Dr. Jekyll is so focused on his work, he doesn't even know they're having an affair. And to make matters worse, he, quote, loans Paul money all the time, which the cad promptly gambles, drinks, or parties away quickly. As Dr. Jekyll keeps injecting himself with this experimental concoction, like I said before, his handsome, sociopathic Mr. Hyde self introduces himself to Paul, and they start hanging out together. Paul quickly learns that Mr. Hyde can become a little too extreme sometimes, witnessing him beating a man severely and having to stop him from going too far. Marco, carry on.
Well, you should have said I was the one who contributed that line.
Yes, Marco is the one who remembered that line, and I mean, he had it totally memorized.
I texted it to you.
Right.
Because I thought it was a funny line, because it's surprising that anybody would say that at that time, like, so openly like that, because of how British people are. And, you see it all the time nowadays, like on...
Marco's not saying that as a cut. He's meaning they're very discreet and closed, and they may not He was surprised that they could be so open.
It is a criticism, actually.
Well,
And this movie shows that, too. It shows that that Dr. Jekyll is just inside of his work, and that she's secretly having this affair, and they're married for some reason, and they're not actually telling each other what really they're thinking. I mean, it's just disgusting. And and because you see it all the time in smaller ways, though, like on the Great British Baking Show, the judges are very nice about what they're saying. They never act like Gordon Ramsay does on Hell's Kitchen or MasterChef. They're always so like
polite.
Yeah, polite and overly polite too. I mean, sometimes it seems like they're not really criticizing. They're just, I don't know how to describe it. It's weird. And this movie really exposes that, and I like how, well, I really was surprised by how good this movie was, because it starts off with Dr. Jekyll, and he's very weird and to himself and emotional and to himself too. And he's very strange, and he wasn't really an identifiable person that you want to watch for 2 hours. And so I was glad that we could see Mr. Hyde come out, and he's the main character, really. Even though he's not as likable, obviously, even though he helps Dr. Jekyll get revenge. And I thought this is the second best origin movie too. There's Curse of Frankenstein, Horror of Dracula, The Mummy, and other ones that we haven't seen yet, and The Gorgon, of course. I would say this one is the second best out of all those. That's how good it was. The wife in the movie was probably the worst thing about it. Worst thing in terms of how evil she was, and how it's like you just wanted to see her get killed.
She was into herself too, but not in a good way. She was just all about herself and what she wanted to do, and she didn't care who it hurt.
She married him.
Yeah, well, we don't know anything about that. Was this an arranged marriage?
Why did she marry him if she didn't want to have sex with him?
Well, also, he's married to his work. I mean, he made it plain to her constantly that he had work to do. Work, 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 work. And she would say, that's nice. And she'd go out and meet her buddy, and they'd have a date. Or so.
That's another thing, too. A lot of movies, that they always have it to where the man is working, and so the wife's having an affair, but it's all the man's fault because he's in with his work so much.
Well, it's not totally true. She seems to be very spoiled.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that in this movie it's different, because it actually turns out that she's the evil one, because she's having this very open affair, and she's doing all this horrible stuff. She's acting horribly to him, and then going over to Christopher Lee and doing stuff with him. Just horrible person she is.
Plus the fact Christopher Lee, well, Paul, is taking money because he seems to be well off, and which may be the reason why she's married. Kitty is married to Dr. Jekyll. What we don't know, if it's arranged marriage or whatever, what it was like, supposed to be like back then. I don't know, even know.
Doesn't matter. She married him.
She married him, but anyway, he's taking money from him all the time. And but it's not that, he's giving it to him.
Yeah.
Why?
Because he's a weak man.
A sucker. He's being manipulated.
And a lot of this movie is also about him overcoming his weakness. Because you have a feeling that he knows this stuff is going on, but then you find out that he actually didn't know it, and that's even more awkward because it turns he's so oblivious too, because he's so focused on his work. Again, movies, Curse of Frankenstein. He's having an affair with his maid, and he's too focused on his work. So it's like a double thing with that. But with this movie, it's done like the opposite. She's the bad guy, he's the good guy, quote unquote. My favorite thing about this movie was I thought it was like Wolf of Wall Street meets Frankenstein, because in Wolf of Wall Street there's a lot of partying, a lot of craziness going on, a lot of people just having fun, and that's what a lot of this movie is, a lot of partying, a lot of underground uh, fighting, and so I really like that too. What do you have to say about this movie, Safi?
Okay, well, the things I liked about the movie were that I thought Mr. Hyde character was more realistically evil by turning him into a cold-blooded, and here where Marco disagrees, but a sociopathic person versus a toothy, ugly, monster-like human being. I just thought that was a better, more grown-up and different way because, like I said in the previous versions, they just made a professor injects himself and turns himself into a monster. He almost growls, and he's almost like a caveman with suit on. And this one is a little bit more realistic, I think. And then the another thing I liked was that Christopher Lee plays a cad instead of a monster. I thought that was fun because, as you know, all we've seen him do, well, we've seen him do a lot, is play Dracula and some other monsters, but this time he's just playing a guy who's a cad, meaning he gambles and he's having an affair and he just does whatever he wants and he spends whatever he wants and he takes whatever he wants, and it seems like he really gives back. Now, Marco hasn't talked about this, but the things that I didn't get about the movie, there are a few. The things that I didn't get was, as the movie went on, it seemed like Dr. Jekyll began to think that he might be able to turn into Mr. Hyde forever. And Marco, sorry,
Marceau.
Yeah, Marceau, disagree with this, but I'm not so sure because the reason why he seems to think that it might last forever is because the changes start lasting for days in almost indeterminate amount of time. But the drug itself is like rapidly aging him and making him insane. So I think this insanity is affecting his better academic and scientific thinking process about the drug, and that it will make him forget that no matter how long the changeover lasts to Mr. Hyde, that it's not going to be forever. And then another thing is there's a woman in the movie who's like a performer with a trained snake, and she does all this stuff with the snake. I mean, she does this elaborate dancing.
Puts it in her mouth.
She ends it, and she does all kinds of stuff with the snake. It's a huge. I don't know. I think it's a python, and at the end she puts it. Ugh, she puts it in her mouth, and then it brings it out, and it's like it's very well trained and very loyal to her, although I don't know how loyal snakes are to people. And so she allows Mr. Hyde to use the snake. I won't say anything else about it, but I I didn't get the fact that she really had a relationship with the snake, meaning it was like her kind of like a pet, and it was very well trained, and he wanted to use it for evil purposes. And I was wondering,
She
did
gave
she
him
know
that.
that? And why would she do
Of
that
course she knew
with
that.
her pet?
She thought that he was going to bring it back to her.
And then I wondered if she'd ever known somebody like him before. His thinking,
No,
where he doesn't,
not at all.
and the other thing I don't want to say without a spoiler alert, but those are the things that I didn't understand, and I questioned, but not that they're a bad thing, but to the story, but just that I didn't get why the things that happened. And then there's some other unbelievable things that I also noted, but I thought Marco would like to address, like the things that what he felt about, well, he already talked about the things that he didn't like. Well, what about the things he didn't get?
I don't mean like I don't like that about the movie, like I don't like that. I just meant I don't like those people. What I didn't get? What do you mean? What are you hinting at?
Like things that happen and you just are kind of like beyond comprehension type things, or maybe you didn't have anything like that.
Well, that's a spoiler.
Okay, well I do have a spoiler alert about the unbelievable
No,
thing.
we can't do that yet. We haven't finished the review. We're still reviewing it.
Okay, well I guess another thing in the call.
Christopher Lee.
No, in the not. Well, that was. Oh, I think I've already talked about that. That I liked. The thing I liked was that he played a human being.
He talks.
And he played a cad, and I enjoyed his character.
He does his lines.
I thought he was interesting, and and he dressed really like the part, and he did an excellent job. I really enjoyed his part in it. And then I guess another section I called the not good part, and I'm not the one complaining about it, but I think some people on Facebook in the Hammer group, and also Marco, complained about Dr. Jekyll's makeup.
Yeah, it looks very fake. It looks like he's just like he just glued it on. He just glued on that beard.
It looks like what it is. It's if you haven't seen the movie, and I don't even know if you looked at just a picture. It looks like they just had some whiskers, and they glued it on his face or stuck it on his face with like spirit gum, and they look kind of ragged, like they weren't even kept.
Used. Remember when I did that Vincent Price thing, and I had to wear a mustache to school? That's I used some spirit gum to put it on. Even that mustache looked more realistic than this. I swear.
Well, it looked like the whiskers were not kept properly. Like they weren't keeping it, and maybe the fact that because when he was Mr. Hyde, it would be easily removable, so you just pull them off.
The makeup was definitely better in the Gorgon in terms of like you have that stone face of the father, and so what else can I say about this movie?
Well, those are the parts that I.
We hope that there's not an irritating noise in the background.
Yeah, they're delivering water to our house, and it's very late.
It was a very unconventional Hammer movie because there wasn't a lot of blood, there wasn't a lot of monster effects. It was just very based around Christopher Lee and Mr. Hyde partying together.
Yes.
Which is something you don't expect from a Hammer movie.
Well, one of the things though is Mr. Hyde asked Christopher Lee if he would show him like the worst things that he could show them, or the most evil. I'm not sure how he phrased it, but the most downgraded level of society in England. And so it seemed like it all happened in a night. Christopher Lee took him to an opium
That was
den.
cool.
Took him to a place where there were prostitutes. And this other place.
And the opium den thing kind of reminds you of Terror of the Tongs.
Yeah. Well, it reminded me of that Western show with Anson Mount. But anyway.
Hell on Wheels.
Hell on Wheels. But anyway. So, and then he also took him to a fight, like a, fight club kind of thing, back in the olden days, and that was interesting. And then you see Mr. Jekyll standing over to the side, like really like evaluating everything he was watching. I mean, he had like an academic, like he was thinking academically, like it was a observation project. So I thought that was interesting. And so anyway, by the end of it, Christopher Lee's kind of like tired, and like, are you done now? And
He's like, that's it?
yeah, is that all you have?
Another thing that's great about this movie is that Mr. Hyde doesn't start off like an animalistic type of just pure evil like in the book. He actually he gets worse and worse throughout the movie for certain reasons. And he gets crazier and crazier and does more evil things as the movie goes on. Including by the end of the movie where he just does a lot of bad things in one day or so. So I really like that about the movie. And another thing I like is that it's so different from any other Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde
Yes,
movie.
very different.
All the other ones, Dr. Jekyll is the smart, nice guy, and Mr. Hyde is this weird, crazy, hobo-looking guy who goes around with a knife and everything. Just very.
He reminds me kind of a
simplistic.
caveman with a suit on.
Yeah.
I mean, in the other versions.
Yeah. And so, anyways, what would you rate this movie, Sophie?
Well, what about this part that it's a spoiler alert? Should we wait after the rating?
Duh, Sophie.
All right. Well, I had no idea what to do. I had this kind of ugly thing about coconut water, but I love this movie. It's the best Jekyll and Hyde movie I've ever seen, so I didn't want to give it this review because it wouldn't come off sounding like I liked it, but I did. So after talking to him, and he said something, it spurred me on to this. I gave it an English trifle, which is a loose layered, sherry-infused sponge cake, custard, fruit, and whipped cream dessert. And it's really like, which is funny because this is an old dessert, and it's been around for 1,000,000 years. But today, if you watch any cooking show, people said, "Oh, I'm making a deconstructed whatever," and it's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Only the peanut butter's on the plate, and the bread's on top of that, and then the jelly is on the. Then they cut off a piece of crust and put the jelly on the crust. I mean, really weirdo stuff. But this is a good thing.
Oh.
It's like a deconstructed cake. It's right loosely put together layers. You have a layer of sponge, and you put the whipped cream on, and then you have to infuse the cake with sherry, which I had no idea, which is good because it's like the drug to make a person who's eating it come out and not be so inward and guarded about what they feel. And then there's whipped cream, and then you put fruit on that, and then you do the layers again, and it's really I've never had it. I've seen it, but it's very popular, and so when the question and the whole thing really, it wasn't just about Dr. Jekyll giving himself an injection and changing into another person. It was really about what are British people really made of, asked this movie. Well, they're fun, good people with lots of interesting layers. It's not just about them being plain old good or evil. So that's why I gave it an English trifle. Hope I said that right. Okay? That's what I rated it. What about you?
This is hard.
Yeah, it was hard.
Really hard. Because I could go one direction or the other. God, it's tough. This is tough. This is tough. Remember that, guys? Okay, I give this movie spaghetti marinara sauce with noodles, and it's a perfect marinara sauce. You know, you make it in 2 seconds. It's got a lot of vegetables chopped up. Uh, but the real reason I chose this is because of the secret ingredient, which is oregano. And so, since like the juice that Dr. Jekyll uses, that's like oregano. Oregano spices everything up and makes it taste better in the spaghetti marinara. And so I think that that's the perfect rating for this movie. But then for dessert, you're gonna have a deconstructed chocolate cake. And so the thing about this is that uh, the first dish, the spaghetti marinara, is very proper and like all British people are, and very packed together. I mean, noodles are all packed in under a sauce, not showing the true feelings. And then the dessert is Mr. Hyde. The dessert, just everything is exposed. It's the real person, and so that's why deconstructed chocolate cake and ice cream, meaning you have the cake part itself is it is, I don't know how to describe what I'm thinking about. The it's kind of like a crumble, like dirt cake kind of. So you have dirt cakey kind of cake, crumbs, and then you have a layer of ice cream and some frosting, some chocolate frosting, and the vanilla ice cream. And that's for like Christopher Lee and the effects of everything else in this movie. The sound, the music was really good. All that stuff is in the dessert. And the movie overall, I give it spaghetti, but then the dessert too. So I don't know. It's a weird rating. I just didn't know what kind of dish would be like Mr. Hyde. Like what dish would be something where it's like devilish uh, or something's exposed besides like something deconstructed. So that's why I rated it that way. I hope everyone doesn't mind. So
Wait, was this the movie that had the can part in it?
yeah,
Okay. I forgot I could say something about the music, too.
yeah, I know, Sophie. And so now for spoiler alert.
Okay, well,
Take it away,
this is
Sophie.
the section I put called Unbelievable. You know, Mr. Cad, Christopher Lee, was very tall and smart, and he goes into this room with the snake. And this snake isn't something like a rattlesnake. And I just don't, unless it's hungry, it's not going to attack him. And at the end of the scene, he's dead with this like face, his eyes are open like in horror, I think his mouth might be open, and his arms are up, and he's kind of on his back on the floor, but not. I don't think he was flat on his back. He was kind of like curved, or part of his body like up. I can't describe it, but I thought I didn't I don't believe it. I don't see how that could have happened. I thought that was unrealistic. He locked him up in this. Mr. Hyde locked him up in the room with the snake, and it wasn't like a cubby hole. It was a big room.
I think that he aggravated the snake somehow, or that since I think that since it wasn't that woman that the snake was irritated, like the man was gonna do something to hurt the snake.
It could be, but I just thought that was a little unrealistic. And I did want to make a comment about the music because I had forgotten, and I don't know why, but the music was really good, and it was like every single part had its own special music. They even had a scene with can-can dancers, which, if you know what that is, you know it's these girls, and they wear these kind of petticoat, flouncy skirts, where they have these fluffy underwear things that are lacy and fluffy, and they do all these. They did this perfect can-can. I mean, they did all the things that can-can dancers do. So they, of course, they play can-can music. All the music was good. Every single part of the movie had, like I said, had its own music. The only thing I thought was weird was with the snake lady. Now she's like, she looks exotic. She has black hair. She has these eyes that are they made the eye makeup very mysterious, and dark. Her eyes are darkened, and and they play some for part of it, they play some odd kind of music that doesn't go with it at all. And then, but the rest of us like an exotic Middle Eastern snake charming kind of music, but the part of it is like a weird. I can't even describe it. It's like a cafeteria music or something. I don't know. It's really weird. I don't even know how they came up with that. But the whole movie, the music, like Marco says, really good and very apropos to whatever's going on in the scene. So that's all I could say about the cat. So the cat got killed by the snake, who was put in there by Mr. Hyde. Oh yeah. I guess there's another part. A part in the section where I didn't get what happened, but maybe I should understand it. I don't know, but it appears that Mr. Hyde. Now remember, he's really Dr. Jekyll, but he's changed into a different person due to this injection. He rapes Kitty. It seems like maybe he didn't, but it looks like he did. They don't show the whole thing. They show him ripping her bodice apart, but they don't show anything. When he leaves, and she's like, she gets up and she's dazed and confused. She didn't see the cad, did she?
No.
And
yes, she did.
She did see the cad, so that he was dead.
She was devastated.
She's very upset.
Oh no!
Because I guess she loved him, which is kind of hard to believe she loves anybody.
She married Dr. Jekyll.
So she leaves the room and goes outside on the porch or whatever you want to call it, balcony. I'm not even sure if
it also shows the difference because Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, he isn't the type of person to just slit someone's throat. He puts up this plan in motion to where she goes and kills herself. And
she jumps off, or she shouldn't jump. She actually passes out, falls off the side of the roof into the glass, a glass ceiling.
I cheered when she died because her character was horrible.
She was horrible because she was full of herself
and
mean, cruel.
The most evil hammer female of all. Like, even more so than the vampire lovers, because at least she saw it as she loved these girls, and so she wanted to kill them like that because she loved them. This woman, ugh,
She
ugh.
was very cruel to her husband, and
And Christopher Lee, his character, I mean, it just seemed like he was just a worthless person.
well, he's a cad. It means they don't really care about anything but themselves, and they just kind of just run around and do whatever they want.
He seemed to care. He seemed to care about her because
Yeah, he did.
he wouldn't let he wouldn't let Mr. Hyde sleep with her for one night.
Oh yeah, that was the thing that Mr. Hyde asked him. Well, he didn't say it exactly like that, but you knew what it was, and it was the night where he had just showed him everything he could show him. He thought the Fight Club, the opium den, all that stuff, and then I think he said, I'm kind of tired. Are we done now? And he said, well, you could. And then it was something like, "Let me sleep with what's her name," but he didn't say it. He didn't say it like that. And of course, Paul does not know that that's really Dr. Jekyll either.
Yeah,
You're talking about
his
Dr.
wife.
Jekyll has a beard, and he looks very sad, and he's very inward. He bows his head, and he has a different voice. It's lower. And Mr. Hyde is barefaced. His hair is impeccably combed. He dresses impeccably, and he's very like shiny. I'll just say he's shiny and
So my biggest problem with this movie was at the end, uh, he doesn't really win. Dr. Jekyll doesn't really win. He
no,
defeats Mr. Hyde. At the end, Mr. Hyde basically sets up the situation where you think Dr. Jekyll killed himself and he was the bad guy and Mr. Hyde's the good guy.
mm-hmm.
And and then somehow Dr. Jekyll defeats him from within and comes out, but at the sacrifice of that, he's now aged tremendously. So, and then the police, of course, arrest him for some reason.
Well,
And
so what happened? Say there had this like inquest, and with these deaths, and it's Mr. Hyde, and they're talking about Dr. Jekyll too, and how he was a bad guy, like Marco said. And then he goes outside and sits on a bench, and he starts having these pains. He's talking to that. Remember that character I talked about at the very beginning, Dr. Ernst Litauer, his colleague. And as he's talking to him, he starts having these pains, and because guess what? He's changing back into Mr. Doctor, sorry,
well, he's destroying him, so he
yeah.
destroyed Mr. Hyde. But number one, how did he do that? And number two, it's not a happy ending because uh, he's gonna be put in prison or put to death. I mean, the whole movie, Dr. Jekyll just gets effed up by everybody. I mean, this guy's taking all of his money, so he can't do his experiments because they're too expensive. His wife won't even let him sleep with her, and she's having an affair at the same time, and just disgusting behavior, and Mr. Hyde is abusing him so that he can go do whatever he wants, and so it's like this whole movie, Dr. Jekyll just gets no breaks at all. And then at the end of the movie, he still gets locked away in prison for murder. I mean, that's sick. That's not a good ending, in my opinion. In fact, it mirrors Curse of Frankenstein, because at the end of Curse of Frankenstein, Doctor Frankenstein is being walked to the execution, his own execution,
Mm.
and that one is another unhappy ending, but he ends up surviving it. Spoiler alert. But in this movie, you don't know, so it's like a very unhappy ending.
Okay, well, I think we're about done.
Yeah.
And we are going to do Hallmark Week. Yeah. It's late. But there are so many Hallmark Christmas movies. Who has the time or wants to watch every single one of them because every single one of them are not good. I watched a, I watched a few stinkers. When I was ill, I just couldn't I didn't do Christmas cards. I did a couple right at the beginning before I got real sick. And of course I had a friend who has a birthday at Christmas. And that's about it. And that's like the first time in 30 years. I think about doing some makeup ones, but anyway, we didn't decorate the tree. We brought the tree in and we put the lights outside, but guess what? A squirrel ate through the lights. So only one strand worked. The rest of them were off the entire time. The weather got bad. We were all too ill to fix them. So it was a kind of a crappy Christmas. But I would get up every night and cough my head off. So I was awake. So I'd watch a Hallmark movie or one during the day because I didn't feel like doing anything else.
And they're all pretty much the same.
Yes, some of them have.
And they're all geared towards women.
Yeah, I've been trying to find one for Marco to watch. He's a 20-year-old guy, and, it makes it difficult. And I have seen postings on Facebook where guys will talk about, well, my girlfriend's watching these Hallmark movies, and I kind of rolled my eyes, and they went to the back of my head, and I went to do something else, and I kind of don't blame them, and because I've watched quite a few of them.
That's what I
Not
started,
all of them, because I can't stand it.
That's what I started to do while watching the Christmas Trend when they did the stupid romance stuff near the end, like when it got really, really bad. Like, remember that when they got quote stuck and they had to go together and like that part.
That one thing about that movie, The Christmas Trend, we've already reviewed this last year, okay? But there were lots of stars. Well, like Danny Glover was
There were
in it.
lots of good actors in it.
Well, and I'm not going to criticize the actors at all.
Why?
Because they're getting work and they're doing a good job with what they've got. And if the story is kind of loose or repetitive, like they've recycled certain things, like a storyline, they've recycled it like 3 times in different people. They'll have somebody who is dying and they're going to be an angel, so the angel helps the family. Well, I'm not going to, but they do a lot of repeating, and also just some of them are just, I'm just not going to watch it because I can tell it's going to be horrible. You can just tell it, and you don't have to watch too much of it. And there's so many of them but I still like them because, like I've said, when you watch one, it's like eating a Christmas cookie.
No, it's not.
And a Christmas cookie's not going to keep you satisfied. It's not like eating a whole meal. It's not like eating a piece of cake and having ice cream with it. It's a Christmas cookie. It's like one bite of a piece of cake.
But Hallmark cards are not just about Christmas, and
No, they're not.
That's another issue with the Hallmark movies, is that they're basically all Christmas movies.
Well, they do have some that go on for other parts of the year, but mainly they focus on Christmas.
Anyways, that's the end.
That's the end.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.